General John Pershing remembered the blood. 1900, the Philippine-American War. In the dense jungle, the shotgun was a reaper. It didn't require a marksman, it required a survivor. 17 years later, Pershing faced a different hell, the Western Front. Mud, wire, and trenches so narrow a rifle was a liability. He knew the solution lived in the past. By November 1917, the American Expeditionary Forces received 5,000 Winchester shotguns. Initially, they were for guards, tools to watch prisoners, but the front line demanded more. 1,000 units moved to the trenches for a lethal experiment. The weapon changed. Engineers shortened the barrel for the tight corners of a dugout. Then came the critical detail. A ventilated steel heat shield clamped over the barrel. In a melee, the steel glowed. The shield meant a soldier could grab the burning metal without losing his skin. It turned a firearm into a blunt instrument. At the tip, they fixed a 1917 model bayonet. The loadout was simple: 12-gauge double-aught buckshot. One shell sent 9 lead pellets into the dark. Each pellet was roughly the size of a .38 caliber bullet. A bolt-action rifle hits a target at 1,000 yards. That was the theory. The Western Front turned that theory into a joke. On the Western Front, the world stalled. High-velocity rounds meant nothing when the enemy was 30 feet away. Sometimes, the distance between trenches was less than a grenade toss. The standard rifle was a meter long. With a bayonet fixed, it became a clumsy pike. In a muddy 6-foot-wide ditch, length was a death sentence. You couldn't turn, you couldn't aim. Soldiers reverted to the primitive. They used revolvers. They sharpened the edges of entrenching tools. They swung heavy clubs and drove knives into guts. It wasn't a war of ballistics, it was a tavern brawl in a graveyard. The American Expeditionary Forces saw the deadlock. They remembered the jungles of the Philippines. They knew that in a cage match, precision is a luxury. The military needed a tool that turned a reflex into a kill zone. While engineers scrambled to fix bayonet lugs to the M97, the infantry already knew the truth. Their long rifles were useless weight in the dark. Every raid became a gamble with a shovel against a pistol. The air in the dugouts was thick with the smell of wet wool and cordite. There was no room for error. The transition to the shotgun was a return to brutal efficiency. Close quarters combat offered no second chances. Steel met bone in the silence. The Model 1897 was a masterpiece of steel, but in the mud of the Western Front, it met a humble and lethal enemy: wet paper. Before the era of plastic, shotgun shells were cardboard cylinders. In the rain-soaked trenches, these shells acted like sponges. Why did the perfect weapon fail in its first battles? The paper swelled. It became soft and bloated. A soldier would rack the slide, and the shell would tear apart in the chamber. The metallic sound of a smooth action was replaced by the wet crunch of shredding cardboard. To survive, the army had to pivot. They stripped the paper and replaced it with full brass casings. Later, they soaked shells in heavy wax. Scouts and patrols took the modified guns into no man's land. The results were immediate. A bolt-action rifle was a sniper's tool. The shotgun was a scythe. The M97 held 1 shell in the chamber and 5 in the tube. 6 rounds of total devastation, but its most terrifying power lay in a missing part: the trigger disconnector. This mechanical gap created a feature called slam firing. If a soldier held the trigger down and pumped the slide, the weapon fired the instant the shell chambered. It didn't wait for a second trigger pull. It became a manual machine gun. The rate of fire depended only on the strength of the soldier's arm. The math of the trench was simple and brutal. Each shell contained 9 lead pellets. One slam-firing soldier could put 54 projectiles into a narrow space in 3 seconds. That is a higher density of lead than any tripod-mounted Maxim gun could achieve in the same window. When multiple shotguns fired at once, the trench became a tunnel of flying metal. American commanders saw the reports and stopped asking for rifles. They sent urgent telegrams for more Winchesters. The troops moved toward the enemy lines, hands tight on the walnut pumps, ready to sweep the German trenches clean. The Winchester Model 1897 did its job too well. While American troops cleared trenches with mechanical precision, the reports reaching Berlin sparked a diplomatic firestorm. The German Empire filed a formal protest through the Swiss legation. They claimed the shotgun caused unnecessary suffering. It was a peak of wartime hypocrisy. The same military that pioneered the use of phosgene and mustard gas now spoke of humanitarianism. Phosgene dissolved the lungs from the inside. Mustard gas burned the skin into yellow blisters. Yet, Berlin focused on the lead pellets of the Winchester. A high-velocity rifle bullet often passed straight through the body. It left a clean, predictable channel. A shotgun blast was different. Soft lead pellets hit the target at close range. They deformed instantly. Upon impact, the round balls flattened into jagged discs, shredding muscle and shattering bone. They didn't pass through. They stayed inside, transferring every joule of kinetic energy into the human torso. The wounds were impossible to stitch. The American government ignored the protest. General Pershing knew the value of the weapon in the mud of the Meuse-Argonne. In response, the German High Command issued a blood-chilling decree. Any American soldier captured with a shotgun would be executed on the spot. Even a single paper shell in a pocket was a death sentence. The threat was clear. The Allies didn't flinch. They issued a counter-warning. For every executed shotgunner, a German prisoner would face the firing squad. The United States military ordered more ammunition. The trenches of the Great War revealed the shotgun's brutal efficiency. But the roots of this violence reach back to the Philippine jungles, 20 years before the mud of Verdun. Why did a bird hunting tool become a military standard? Because a bolt-action rifle could not stop a fanatic with a machete. The year was 1899. American soldiers moved through the tall Kogan grass of Mindanao. Visibility was zero. The air smelled of rotting vegetation and stagnant water. A sudden rustle. The Moro warriors charged from 10 paces. A soldier raised his Krag Jorgensen rifle. One shot. Missed. The bolt was too slow. The reload was an eternity. The blade was already at his throat. John Browning had designed the Winchester Model 1897 for civilian hunters. It was a mechanical masterpiece. But the U.S. Army didn't want a masterpiece. They wanted a survival tool. The jungle turned every encounter into a claustrophobic trap. Long-range accuracy meant nothing when the enemy appeared from the shadows. The Philippines campaign eventually claimed the lives of 4,000 Americans. It was a bloody tuition fee for a lesson in close-quarters combat. The Winchester Model 1897 changed the math of the ambush. A soldier heard the grass break. He didn't aim, he pointed. The heavy pump-action slide slammed forward with a metallic clack. Fire. A wall of lead. The Moro warrior fell before he could swing. The soldier cycled the action again. 2 shots in 3 seconds. 5 rounds of buckshot cleared the path. Speed saved his life. The concept of the lead cloud wasn't born from a master gunsmith's bench. It began with a heavy sack of scrap metal. 300 years before the Philippines, the principle of mass destruction already existed. 17th century warfare was a game of tight formations. Solid iron balls were effective against stone walls, but useless against a charging line of men. The solution was simple and brutal. Artillerymen bypassed precision entirely. They packed cannons with leather bags full of lead balls, iron chains, and rusty nails. They called it grape shot. One fuse, one massive explosion. A single blast transformed a field into a slaughterhouse. How did this change the battlefield? It turned every cannon into a giant, stationary shotgun. At close range, the canister disintegrated. The shrapnel didn't just kill, it shredded. Musket fire was a gamble. Grape shot was a guarantee. A single discharge could wipe out 50 men in 1 second. This was the birth of ballistic terror. The math of the 1700s was cold. One heavy projectile might miss. 500 small ones never did. Grape shot proved that at short distances, volume of fire outweighed accuracy. It remained the most effective tool against a dense infantry charge. The logic of grape shot eventually shrank to the size of a handheld gun. To defend a ship from boarding parties, sailors needed a wall of lead, not a sniper's precision. Enter the blunderbuss. It was the first true ancestor of the modern shotgun. A short, massive bore ending in a flared muzzle. It didn't fire a single bullet. It spat a heavy cloud of scrap, lead balls, and jagged metal. In the chaos of a naval boarding, aiming was a luxury. One shot decided a sailor's fate. A miss meant death by a cutlass. The blunderbuss removed the need for accuracy. It turned a narrow wooden deck into a kill zone. But as the 19th century progressed, the world changed. Rifled barrels appeared, range tripled. Accuracy became the new god of war. The shotgun was pushed out of the barracks and into the hands of hunters. It became a tool for birds, not men. Then came the summer of 1914. The Great War began with long-range bolt-action rifles. Generals obsessed over high-power cartridges and distance. They expected a clean, professional war fought at 500 yards. The trenches were waiting. Distance was about to disappear. Armies across Europe sat in the mud, clutching rifles designed for open fields. The world fell into a tense, bloody, expectant wait. The real renaissance of brutality didn't happen in the streets of Europe. It ignited on the islands of the Pacific. The Japanese General Staff issued a clear directive. Any American captured with a shotgun was to be executed. They viewed the weapon as a barbaric relic. High-ranking officers in Tokyo debated the Geneva Convention. Men in the mud simply looked for a way to survive. Marine squads moved through the dense green walls of Peleliu and Guadalcanal. The air smelled of rotting vegetation and stale gunpowder. A scout froze. He heard a metallic click in the ferns. He didn't aim. He didn't have time. He slammed the pump of his Winchester 1912. Before the final push into the caves, a brutal reality set in. Marines often emptied their pockets of brass shells before a surrender became inevitable. They threw the ammunition into the tall grass. To be caught with a shotgun meant a slow death. They chose to face the enemy unarmed, rather than face the aftermath of their own weapon. The jungle turned every encounter into a nightmare of 10-foot distances. Fanatical night charges became the norm. The Winchester 1912 replaced the rifle as the primary life insurance policy for the Pacific Infantry. It was no longer just a tool for military police. It was the only thing capable of stopping a bayonet charge in total darkness. The shotgun became the definitive answer for clearing fortified bunkers and spider holes across the Pacific. The jungle of Vietnam demanded a different kind of violence. The Winchester yielded to a new favorite, the Ithaca Model 37. Short, reliable, deadly in the brush. Steel and gears couldn't conquer the canopy alone. An M48 Patton tank was a fortress, but it was blind. Behind the turret, a gunner sat on the hot engine deck. He stayed there for hours, his back pressed against the armor. In his hands, he gripped a shotgun. This was the only defense against a lethal shadow. A single insurgent with a satchel charge or an RPG could end the crew in seconds. The tank commander operated the main gun, but the man on the deck saved the tank. He watched the rear. He waited for the movement in the grass. Industrialized slaughter reached its zenith when engineers turned the tank itself into a shotgun. They created the beehive round. One shell, thousands of steel flechettes. These were not bullets. They were tiny, fin-stabilized darts designed to shred everything in their path. When a Patton fired a beehive into a human wave, the jungle simply dissolved. It was the final evolution of the trench gun. The M8.4 canister round contained 8,000 steel needles. The killing power that shredded the Vietnamese jungle found a new home on the streets of modern cities. The shotgun moved from the muddy trenches to the gloved hands of the point man. He stands first in line. Behind him, the team waits. In his hands, the Mossberg 500. A pump-action legend, reliable as a hammer. He reaches the door. The wood is thick. The lock is reinforced steel. A rifle is useless here. He presses the muzzle against the hinges. One blast. The master key, a compact shotgun mounted under the rifle barrel, replaces the grenade launcher. It is the ultimate skeleton key. Specialized breaching rounds disintegrate on impact. No ricochets, no shrapnel flying back at the team, just a clean entry. Veteran operators from Iraq and Afghanistan call it the most effective tool for house clearing. If the primary rifle jams in a narrow corridor, the underbarrel shotgun becomes the final line of defense. It saves lives when seconds turn into lifetimes. But not every threat requires a body bag. The police needed control without a high body count. They loaded the Benelli M4 with beanbag rounds. The sound is a dull, heavy thud. The projectile hits the chest like a professional boxer's hook. It knocks the wind out of the target. It pins them to the ground. Painful, incapacitating, but rarely lethal. The British military adopted the semi-automatic Benelli for the same reason: versatility. Yet the era of the shotgun as a mere tool for breaching doors and policing riots is ending. The weapon is returning to the front lines of a real war. But while SWAT teams were breaching doors, a threat emerged in the skies over Ukraine for which there are no keys. It is a persistent, high-pitched buzz, the sound of a plastic toy. Why do 21st century soldiers beg for weapons from the Great War? The answer is screaming above their heads. An FPV drone weighs less than a laptop. It carries a shaped charge or a grenade. It moves at 150 kilometers per hour. To a soldier in a trench, this is not a machine. It is personalized, guided death. The modern service rifle is a precision instrument. It is designed for targets at 300 meters. But against a zigzagging piece of plastic, a 5.56 or 7.62 round is useless. You are trying to hit a bird with a needle. A rifle costing thousands of dollars against a buzzing piece of plastic and a joystick. The drone wins. The FPV pilot sees the soldier's eyes through the camera. He can chase him into a dugout. He can wait behind a tree. There is no jamming. The wire-guided versions ignore electronic warfare. The infantry was defenseless. Then they remembered the trenches of 1917. In the Donbass, the shotgun has returned as the only desperate chance for survival. The Russian and Ukrainian armies are now officially issuing shotguns to frontline units. Standard birdshot offers a chance, but a chance is not a solution. FPV drones strike at 150 kilometers per hour. They maneuver, they swarm. A soldier has 3 seconds to spot, aim, and fire. 7 shells in the magazine. That is the limit. There is no time to reload when the buzzing turns into a scream. Engineers at the United States Air Force saw the desperation and built Skynet. These are specialized 12-gauge rounds designed for one purpose. When fired from a rifled barrel, the projectile splits into 5 tethered segments. In mid-air, they unfurl into a 5-foot-wide net of high-strength cord. The mesh expands like a spiderweb, snatching spinning rotors out of the sky. 140 meters of effective range. For a shotgun, this is sniper distance. It turns a defensive tool into a localized anti-aircraft battery. Russia followed with its own version, a 12-gauge cartridge packed with Kevlar mesh. It operates on the same principle, but covers a much shorter distance. Despite the high-tech nets, the reality in the mud remains primitive. Specialized rounds are expensive and rare. Most soldiers still bet their lives on a standard box of buckshot. Standard buckshot remains the king of the trenches, but the industry is trying to shrink the shotgun into a rifle magazine. Engineers are testing experimental rifle rounds. Instead of one bullet, the casing holds a cluster of small tungsten balls. One trigger pull, a miniature cloud of lead. The goal is simple. A soldier swaps a magazine. His standard rifle becomes a drone killer. No extra weight, no bulky second weapon. Are these rounds effective? Perhaps, but they remain rare experiments in a world of mass production. Reality is much more brutal. In Ukraine, the shotgun is now standard issue. Every infantry squad carries at least one. Every armored vehicle has a designated sentry. One man, one Remington or Mossberg, one task: watch the sky. But the human hand is becoming the weak link. If a soldier struggles to hit a fast-moving X-shaped silhouette, the solution is obvious. Give the shotgun to another drone. Aerial hunters are already patrolling the front. Picture a heavy lift frame. It hovers. A 6-barrel shotgun is bolted to its belly. It looks like a mechanical insect from a dark future. The operator finds a target. The drone stabilized. It fires. The recoil shakes the frame, but the spread of lead is clinical. 12-gauge shells are no longer just clearing rooms. They are clearing the airspace. This is the total dehumanization of the hunt. A machine kills a machine using a weapon from the age of horse-drawn carriages. 1917. The shotgun was a tool for clearing mud-filled trenches. 2024. It is the last line of defense against artificial intelligence. The weapon is the same. The war is unrecognizable. Both sides in Ukraine now include at least one shotgun per infantry squad.